We're receiving confirmation now. A sitting U.S. governor has been arrested in connection with a Chinese fentanyl network worth $1.4 billion.
At 6:47 this morning, federal authorities announced the dismantling of what they are calling the largest Chinese fentanyl precursor network ever discovered on American soil. Estimated value $1.4 billion. Estimated reach 6 states, 14 distribution hubs, and a chemical pipeline capable of producing enough synthetic poison to kill every man, woman, and child west of the Mississippi 3 times over. That was the press conference. Clean word, measured delivery, official language designed to sound complete. But this story is not complete. What happened in California over the last 72 hours was not a raid. It was an unraveling. And by the time you understand how deep this network reached, you will understand why the men and women who dismantled it have not slept in 4 days. This is how a $1.4 billion fentanyl precursor empire collapsed in silence. And this is the part they did not tell you at the podium. 4017 A.M. San Pedro District, Port of Los Angeles. The marine layer hung like gauze over the terminal cranes. Sodium lights painted everything amber and shadow. Container ships sat patient in their berths, stacked geometries of global commerce, waiting for daylight and paperwork. The only sounds were diesel generators and the distant hum of the 110 freeway carrying early commuters who had no idea what was about to happen 3 miles from their bumper. At precisely 4C17, 11 unmarked vehicles entered the port through 3 separate gates using credentials that had been activated 6 hours earlier and would be deactivated 6 hours later. No one questioned the timing. No one questioned the silence. FBI, DA, ICE, Homeland Security investigations. They moved like water finding cracks in concrete. No sirens, no announcements. Just boots on asphalt and radios set to channels that did not officially exist. The target was a shipping container marked for agricultural equipment, destined for a processing facility in Bakersfield. The manifest listed industrial centrifuges and polymer tubing. The weight was correct. The documentation was immaculate. The container had cleared customs inspection twice in the previous month without incident. None of that mattered anymore. Agents surrounded the container. Bolt cutters bit through the security seal. The doors swung open to reveal exactly what the manifest promised. Centrifuges, tubing, crates of replacement parts. And behind them, in a compartment that did not appear on any schematic, 400 steel drums containing precursor chemicals sufficient to synthesize approximately 1 million fentanyl pills. The field test kits changed color before the swabs were fully applied. Agents stepped back, not from fear, from recognition. They had found the source, but the source was not the end. The source was the beginning. Simultaneously, 37 miles inland, a second team hit a warehouse complex in the city of industry. This location had been under surveillance for 11 weeks. It presented as a legitimate chemical distribution company serving agricultural clients throughout the Central Valley. Tax records clean. Safety inspections passed. Employee records complete and unremarkable. The warehouse manager, a 53-year-old man named Wei Chen, had lived in California for 22 years. He coached youth soccer. He donated to local charities. He attended city council meetings to advocate for better traffic infrastructure. He was also the Western Regional Coordinator for a transnational fentanyl precursor network that federal investigators had codenamed Operation Jade Furnace. When agents entered the facility at 4:23 a.m., Wei Chen was already at his desk. He had been there since 2 a.m., processing shipment confirmations that would never be completed. His computer displayed a routing interface that connected to 17 subsidiary distribution points across California, Nevada, and Arizona. He did not resist. He did not speak. He simply removed his glasses, set them on the desk, and waited. The warehouse contained 47 million in precursor chemicals stored under conditions that would satisfy any pharmaceutical manufacturer. Temperature controlled, humidity regulated, batch numbered and tracked through a proprietary software system that synchronized with shipping partners across 3 continents. This was not a criminal operation hiding from detection. This was a criminal operation designed to be indistinguishable from legitimate business, and for 11 years, it had succeeded. By 50:30 a.m., the scope of Operation Jade Furnace became clear. In a converted conference room at the FBI's Los Angeles field office, analysts projected a network diagram onto a wall that was not large enough to contain it. The image spilled across adjacent surfaces, connections multiplying like fractures in glass. The operation was not a single pipeline. It was an ecosystem. Precursor chemicals entered the United States through 5 primary ports: Los Angeles, Long Beach, Oakland, Seattle, and Houston. They were hidden in shipments of legitimate industrial goods, agricultural supplies, and pharmaceutical raw materials. Documentation was flawless because documentation was the product. The network employed specialists whose sole function was creating paper trails that could withstand customs scrutiny. Once on shore, chemicals were distributed through a secondary network of legitimate, appearing businesses: chemical supply company, agricultural processing facilities, industrial cleaning product manufacturer. Each entity maintained genuine customers who had no idea they were sharing supply chains with the largest fentanyl precursor operation in American history. The downstream customers were the Sinaloa Cartel, CJNG, independent manufacturers operating clandestine superlabs throughout Mexico and increasingly within the United States itself. The Precursor network did not produce fentanyl. It enabled fentanyl production on a scale that had previously been impossible. And at the center of this ecosystem, federal investigators found something that shifted the investigation from criminal to existential. They found a name. Not a cartel name, not a criminal name, a political name. Governor Raymond Castellanos of the fictional state of Pacific California, a rising political star, a champion of progressive criminal justice reform, a man who had positioned himself as the moderate voice of reason in an increasingly polarized political landscape. And according to encrypted communications recovered from 14 separate devices seized during the morning raid, a man who had spent the last 7 years providing political protection for Operation Jade Furnace in exchange for contributions that totaled approximately $23 million. Let me be clear about what investigators found. Governor Castellanos did not touch drug. He did not handle chemical. He did not meet with cartel representatives or fentanyl manufacturers. His hands remained technically clean in every way that mattered to criminal defense attorneys. What he did was worse. He created policy environment. He appointed regulatory commissioners who understood which inspections to delay. He advocated for port efficiency measures that reduced scrutiny on specific shipping categories. He championed criminal justice reforms that quietly reduced penalties for precursor trafficking while publicly focusing on nonviolent drug possession. He did not build the pipeline. He removed the obstacles from its path. And he did it so gradually, so reasonably, so wrapped in the language of progress and efficiency that no one noticed the pattern until federal analysts mapped 7 years of policy decisions against 7 years of Operation Jade Furnace expansion. The correlation was not coincidental, it was architectural. This was not corruption. This was command-level collusion disguised as governance. 6012 M. The second phase began. Across California, SWAT teams activated, FBI task forces mobilized, DA field offices emptied, ICE enforcement units coordinated with state and local partners who had been briefed only hours earlier to prevent leaks. The operational map displayed 47 targets spread across 6 counties. Each target represented a node in the Operation Jade Furnace network: distribution center, transportation hubs, financial processing facilities, communication relays, and the residences of 17 individuals identified as principal operators. The strike was designed for simultaneity. Every target hit within a 15-minute window. No warning. No opportunity for the network to contract or destroy evidence. No chance for word to spread from one location to another. This is what happened next. In Fontana, agents breached a trucking company that specialized in agricultural transport. The facility contained 12 tractor-trailers modified with hidden compartments capable of moving precursor chemical without detection at weigh stations or inspection points. Drivers had been trained to use specific routes where enforcement presence was statistically minimal. Route planning software on company computers incorporated real-time traffic camera data and patrol car GPS tracking obtained through compromised law enforcement databases. The trucking company had moved an estimated $140 million in precursor chemical over the previous 3 years while maintaining a perfect safety record and winning a regional Small Business Excellence Award. In Ontario, agents entered a data center that presented as a cloud hosting provider for small businesses. The servers contained encrypted communication archives for the entire Operation Jade Furnace network, financial record, shipment tracking, personnel files, and most critically, correspondence with 43 public officials across California, Nevada, and Arizona who had received payments in exchange for various forms of cooperation. The official count would later include 12 police officers, 4 county sheriffs, 2 judges, 7 state legislators, and 18 regulatory employees at various levels of government. In Pasadena, agents arrested Dr. Helen Trang, a 61-year-old chemistry professor who had spent 3 decades teaching at respected universities while moonlighting as a quality control consultant for the Precursor network. Her expertise ensured that chemicals met purity standards required by downstream manufacturing. Her academic credentials provided cover for travel to inspect facilities and advise on production optimization. She had written 17 peer-reviewed papers on synthetic chemistry. She had mentored hundreds of students. She had received a Lifetime Achievement Award from her professional association. She had also personally certified precursor shipments that contributed to an estimated 47,000 fentanyl overdose deaths across the American West. By noon, the initial strike was complete. Agents had seized precursor chemicals with a manufacturing potential value of $1.4 billion. They had frozen financial accounts totaling $89 million. They had confiscated weapons including Glock 17s, Glock 19s, AR-15 platforms, and a small arsenal of automatic weapons that had never been used because the network preferred to operate through corruption rather than confrontation. They had arrested 43 individuals directly connected to Operation Jade Furnace Operation, and they had compiled evidence sufficient to indict Governor Raymond Castellanos on 17 federal charges including conspiracy, money laundering, and providing material support to a transnational criminal organization. But the operation was not complete. The network extended beyond California, and the network's insurance policies were beginning to activate. 20:34 p.m.'s emergency coordination call, FBI Director's Office, connected to DEA Administrator's Office, connected to DHS Secretary's Office, connected to field commanders across 6 states. The subject was a development that had emerged from decrypted communications on the Ontario server. Operation Jade Furnace had anticipated federal interdiction. The network had prepared contingencies, and those contingencies were designed to ensure that even if the American operation collapsed, the broader infrastructure would survive. Investigators had identified what they called Protocol Vermilion. Protocol Vermilion was a dead man's switch. If the network's primary communication channels went silent for more than 18 hours, automated systems would execute a series of predetermined actions. First, financial reserves totaling approximately $200 million would be transferred through a cascade of shell companies to destinations beyond American jurisdiction. Second, compromising materials on American officials would be distributed to media outlets in 6 countries. Third, and most critically, backup precursor supplies stored at 11 secondary locations would be activated for immediate distribution to cartel manufacturing facilities. The 18-hour clock had started at 4:17 a.m. Federal agencies had until Hyundai 17 p.m. to locate and neutralize 11 backup storage sites before Protocol Vermilion triggered a contingency that would reconstruct the network within weeks. 4:00 p.m. The hunt expanded. Intelligence indicated backup storage sites were distributed across California, Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico. Locations had been selected for deniability. Abandoned industrial facilities, foreclosed agricultural properties, decommissioned cold storage warehouses. Federal resources mobilized on a scale typically reserved for counterterrorism operations. 400 FBI agents, 200 DA personnel, 150 ICE officers, 60 U.S. Marshals, technical support teams from NSA and Treasury Department, aerial surveillance from DHS and Coast Guard, coordination with state and local law enforcement totaling another 300 officers across 4 states. Black Hawk helicopters lifted from bases in San Diego and Tucson. Surveillance drones launched from mobile command posts established at strategic intervals. Traffic analysis teams monitored highway systems for unusual movement pattern. The operation was no longer about dismantling a network. It was about preventing reconstruction. 5:47 p.m. First backup site located. An abandoned citrus processing facility in Riverside County. Satellite imagery showed recent vehicle traffic inconsistent with the property's foreclosure status. Thermal imaging detected climate control systems operating in a structure that should have been disconnected from utilities. SWAT teams approached from 3 directions. The breach was clean, no resistant. The facility contained precursor chemicals valued at approximately $40 million, stored under conditions identical to the primary distribution sites. The site also contained something investigators had not anticipated. In a locked office, they found communications equipment connecting to a network separate from Operation Jade Furnace. Different encryption, different protocol, different operator. Analysis would later reveal that this secondary network belonged to the Sinaloa cartel. Operation Jade Furnace had not merely supplied the cartel, it had integrated with cartel logistics at a level that blurred the boundary between supplier and partner. The fentanyl precursor network was not feeding the cartel, it had become part of the cartel. 7:23 p.m., Phoenix, Arizona. Agents hit a warehouse complex on the city's industrial south side. The facility presented as an automotive parts distributor. Inventory records showed alternators, brake components, and transmission assembly. The warehouse contained 38 tons of precursor chemicals hidden behind a false wall constructed with professional-grade concealment techniques. Security was heavier here. 4 armed guards. Weapons included Glock 19s and 2 AR-15 platforms. The guards did not resist. They had been given instructions for exactly this scenario: surrender, cooperate, protect nothing. The chemicals were the insurance. The personnel were expendable. 8:15 p.m. Tucson, Arizona, a foreclosed cattle ranch 40 miles south of the city. The property had been purchased 18 months earlier through a shell company registered in Delaware. Property records showed no improvement. Utility records showed no service. Surveillance teams found 6 vehicles parked behind a barn that contained climate-controlled storage units powered by industrial generators. The storage units contained precursor chemical. They also contained documentation linking the ranch to a human smuggling operation that had moved an estimated 3,000 migrants across the Arizona border over the previous 2 years. The migrants had been charged $8,000 each for passage. They had been transported in conditions that resulted in an unknown number of deaths, and the profits from human smuggling had been used to finance precursor chemical purchases. Operation Jade Furnace was not a drug network. It was a diversified criminal enterprise that treated human beings as a commodity no different from the chemicals it trafficked. 9:34 p.m. The clock continued. 8 backup sites located and secured. 3 remained. Intelligence placed the remaining sites in New Mexico and Nevada. Field teams were en route, but the 18-hour window was closing. At 9:47 p.m., analysts detected anomalous activity on financial networks connected to Operation Jade Furnace shell companies. Automated transfer protocols were initializing. Protocol Vermilion was beginning to execute. Treasury Department cyber units moved to intercept. The transfers were complex, designed to cascade through multiple jurisdictions before settling in accounts beyond American reach. The first transfer was blocked. The second was blocked. The third escaped, moving $12 million to an account in Singapore before freeze orders could be executed. The race was no longer against the clock. It was against mathematics. 10:02 p. Reno, Nevada. The 9th backup site, a cold storage facility on the outskirts of the city. FBI teams breached at 10:02 p.m., 15 minutes before the Protocol Vermilion deadline. Inside, they found the communications hub that controlled the automated system. Servers hummed in climate-controlled racks. Screens displayed countdown timers that had reached single digits. Technical teams isolated the system. Protocol Vermilion's document distribution was halted mid-transmission. Financial transfers were frozen. Backup activation commands were intercepted. The dead man's switch had failed. On 9:41 p.m. Albuquerque, New Mexico, the final backup site, a decommissioned food processing plant that had sat empty for 7 years. Agents found precursor chemicals valued at $67 million. They found financial records documenting payments to officials across 3 states. They found communications archives that would take months to fully analyze. And they found something else. In a locked room on the facility's 2nd floor, they found evidence that Operation Jade Furnace had been planning expansion, not incremental growth, transformation. Documents outlined a proposal to establish domestic fentanyl manufacturing facilities within the United States. The proposal identified locations. It projected production capacity. It calculated profit margins that dwarfed the precursor supply business. The network had not intended to remain a supplier. It intended to become a manufacturer, and it intended to use the political protection it had cultivated to shield domestic drug production from law enforcement interference. California was not the network's market. California was supposed to become the network's home. By midnight, Operation Jade Furnace was finished. 11 backup sites secured. Protocol Vermilion neutralized. Financial transfers blocked. Communication networks dismantled. 67 individuals arrested across 4 states. Precursor chemicals with a manufacturing potential value exceeding $1.4 billion seized and scheduled for destruction. Financial assets totaling $127 million frozen pending forfeiture proceedings. And Governor Raymond Castellanos, who had spent the day in increasingly frantic communication with attorneys and advisors, was taken into federal custody at 11:47 p.m. on 17 charges that carried potential sentences totaling 340 years. He did not resist. He did not speak. He simply removed his watch, set it on the table, and waited. Here is what the morning press conference did not explain. Operation Jade Furnace operated for 11 years because it understood something fundamental about power. Violence attracts attention. Money creates dependence, but policy creates infrastructure. The network did not bribe officials to look away. It shaped the environment in which enforcement operated. It changed the rules rather than breaking. It made its activities legal in effect by ensuring that the laws which should have prevented them were never properly implemented. This is the lesson that should terrify you. The network moved $1.4 billion in precursor chemicals capable of producing enough fentanyl to kill millions of Americans. It did this not by evading law enforcement, but by capturing the officials who directed law enforcement. It did this not by hiding from regulations, but by writing the regulations. And it did this so quietly, so gradually, so wrapped in the language of efficiency and progress, that no one noticed until federal analysts spent 11 weeks mapping connections that should have been obvious. The chemicals seized in California would have produced approximately 1 million fentanyl pills. Each pill represents a potential death. Each death represents a family destroyed. Each family represents a community weakened. The network treated these deaths as acceptable business costs. It calculated overdose rates as market indicators. It optimized supply chains to maximize the efficiency of poison distribution. And it protected this operation through democratic institutions corrupted from within. This story is fictional. The names are invented. The events are dramatized, but the patterns are real. Across America, fentanyl precursor networks operate through the same model: legitimate business structures, political protection, regulatory capture, integration with cartel logistics. The network dismantled in California is one of many. The officials arrested are a fraction of those compromised. The chemicals seized represent weeks of supply, not years. The fight continues, the patterns persist, and the deaths accumulate. If you have watched this far, you understand something that press conferences cannot convey. The threat is not criminals hiding in shadows. The threat is corruption hiding in plain sight. The threat is power that looks legitimate until you trace where the money goes. This is not a story about law enforcement success. This is a warning about institutional vulnerability. And until that vulnerability is addressed, until the patterns that enabled Operation Jade Furnace are recognized and dismantled wherever they appear, the next network is already forming. The next chemicals are already shipping. The next deaths are already inevitable. If this story reached you, share it. Not for engagement, not for algorithm, because silence is the currency that networks like this depend on. And attention is the only force that can break the pattern. Comment if you want these stories to continue. Subscribe if you believe accountability matters. And remember, this story is fictional, but the threat it represents is not. The fog has lifted over the port of Los Angeles. The cranes are moving again. Commerce continues as if nothing happened. But something did happen. And somewhere, right now, someone is studying what went wrong with Operation Jade Furnace. Someone is identifying the vulnerabilities that led to its collapse. Someone is designing the next network to avoid those vulnerabilities. The question is whether we will be ready when they do.